Good morning. I'd like to wish you a very warm welcome to the first in our webinar series, Delivering Real Social Value Through Apprenticeships. My name is Nikki Cooper and I'm one of Oxfordshire Apprenticeship Advisors at Oxlep Skills and part of our social contract programme. This morning's webinar will take the form of a panel discussion, and as we're in webinar mode, the cameras and microphones are turned off. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please do pop any questions that you have along the way in the chat, and we'll do our best to cover them at the end of the session. Next slide, please. So at Oxlep, it is our role to champion Oxfordshire's economic potential, acting as a catalyst and conveyor to drive a dynamic, sustainable and growing economy. Our social contract programme, as you can see, is a 1.7 million programme funded by the Community Outreach Fund, which is aimed at addressing the impacts of COVID-19 in relation to kind of unemployment, barriers to employment, education and training, focusing on 4 main groups. As you can see, young people at risk of NEET, that's not in education or training, minority ethnic communities, those furthest from the labour market and the over 50s. We're therefore passionate about businesses taking control of where their levy is spent and creating real social value through the use of their levy underspend. Next slide, please. As you can see from this slide, there are many examples of the social value that taking on an apprentice and using the levy can provide to a business, such as supporting sector shortages or supporting local supply chain. So today we are really delighted to welcome Martin Youngjohns, Operational Training Manager, and Keith Fisher, Apprenticeship Lead from Jacob Dow Edberts Banbury, who are truly committed to creating real social value through the use of their unspent apprenticeship levy. We're also delighted to welcome Kush Nujhar, Apprenticeship Lead from the Thames Valley Primary Care Workforce, who will talk about the benefits of being in receipt of a levy pledge. So I would now like to hand over to my colleague Leah Bryan, who has been instrumental with supporting JDE Banbury with their levy pledge and also working with Kush from Thames Valley Primary Care as a recipient. Leah, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Good morning, all. I'm going to fire my first question at the lovely Martin. Good morning, Martin. I just wanted to ask you, what first made you consider the Apprenticeship Levy pledge?
Well, for us in JDE in Banbury, it was just a recognition actually initially that you could actually do this was something that we'd seen, but for us then it was about how we're going about doing it, and it really fits into our CB and our compelling business need within JDE and Banbury, which is to make this the factor of choice. And that involves going out also into the community and making sure that we support local businesses where we can, local charities where we can. And so when we found out about the levy transfer and how easy it was actually to enable us to make that change to delivering this transfer to other businesses and charities, it was something we just grabbed with both hands really, because it was something that we really wanted to do. We just didn't have an outlet to do it until we really understood the process, and with your support, obviously, Leah, absolutely grateful for that. It was an absolutely no-brainer that we just then started to look at how we went about doing that, and we couldn't believe how easy it was. So the great work that you're doing at Oxlep, we're happy to support and continue to support, and I've set Keith a challenge to see how much more of the levy we can transfer for 2023 as well.
Cool. And before you kind of started your work with Oxlep, Martin, were you aware of the levy pledge scheme?
We knew it was in the background, but it wasn't something that we actually started to explore until really we recognised how much levy was actually being passed back, that wasn't being utilised, that we were obviously creating within JDE, but then was just falling off the end, as you like. And so once we recognised what that kind of value was and understood how we could then actually help others with that funding, it was just, as I say, it was something that we really grabbed hold of to make sure that we could support the local community, Oxfordshire, Banbury, and you know, I know it sounds quite trite in some ways, but just give that back to being able to support, you know, other businesses.
And how did you know that you weren't using all of your levy? Was it easy to find that information out?
It was, but if I ask Keith to answer that, because he's the one who really deals with the
Yeah,
direct data
absolutely.
day to day, that would be something that he can jump in and say.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I mean, if you go into the government website, then you can see the finances and you can see how much you've got in your levy pot and the funds, and then when you agree to do the pledge, it tells you how much you're allowed to pledge from your existing pot of money. So in that respect, it is quite easy. And then, like Martin said, Leah, with your help, you contacted, you know, the businesses that could then benefit from our pledge. And that included, you know, the Catherine House Hospice, which is very close to JDE as our charity as well. So it wasn't that hard because I did it, so it must be okay.
And you did a great job, Keith. And
you.
just to kind of point out to people that are listening, you can transfer up to 25% of your levy, and that is worked out for you, and myself and Nikki can help you to find that. I'm going to bring Kush into the conversation, the lovely Kush, who is from the NHS and works for the Primary Care Trust. So you are one of the businesses, organisations that have benefited and supporting from this match in the levy pledging funds. Kush, some people on the call might think that the NHS have their own apprenticeship levy and that you wouldn't need to have this transfer. Can you kind of briefly explain, without kind of going into politics, how you've benefited and why this has been so good for you?
Yes, absolutely. So I represent GP practices up and down the Thames Valley area, and they are predominantly small employers who are non-levy payers. And you're absolutely right, Leah, we do have acute, massive, who do have levy. But as you know, the healthcare workforce, you know, we have demands to grow our workforce, particularly in the nursing pathway. And therefore, many acute trusts have developed their workforce development plans over 1, 2, 3, 5 years. And so actually they are utilising their levy, which is absolutely fantastic. And last year we saw a growth in the amount of levy that businesses in the UK are spending. But also many of them are employer providers, which is great because they can deliver their own programmes or be part of that partnership journey with universities and other training providers. But it then also makes it a bit complicated when you are trying to levy transfer to within the same sector to employers who might be using your own training programs, and that becomes a bit complicated within the funding rules.
I see, yeah.
For somebody like me, I'm based within the Frimley ICS footprint. I don't understand Oxfordshire, that geographically the area, but there are 67 practices plus 20 primary care networks. So can you imagine the amount of apprenticeship activity that can be going on? So to connect with Oxlep has been brilliant for me because you've just made the process so much smoother, in that you are my point of contact to reach out to the private organisations and public sector organisations when I have a need, be it pharmacy technician, nursing associate, in this case with JDE. It's just a really smooth transition.
Thanks, Kush. And for, again, anyone on the call that is kind of thinking, oh, yeah, actually, we might have some levy that could support Kush and the NHS. Do you think there are more opportunities in the future for you to have that need for pledges?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And if I don't, I have colleagues that do. So, you know, the contact is definitely there. We've got huge targets upon primary care. So you might have heard of the 50k nurses within NHS, and primary care is kind of the next area that is, you know, where we want to grow these numbers. But also we have a whole load of workforce expansion roles going on. So the support workforce that supports these professional roles, these are the areas that we can really be growing our workforce using apprenticeships. So we see that as a growth area for apprenticeships, but also non-clinical programs. So primary care are improving their understanding of how apprenticeship training can be used to develop their own workforce, their own existing workforce, as well as bringing in new recruits. So it's definitely a growing area. You know, and as I get out there and speak to more practices, I will definitely be knocking on more doors for support with Levy.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you can always knock on our door. And can I just ask both yourself and Keith, because part of the process means that we have to kind of join up your digital apprenticeship service accounts. Is that easy to do? Was it complicated?
Well, from JDE's point of view, no, not really. There's a UK PN number that we need, and once that's introduced into the system, then the transfers just go smoothly. So yeah, from our point of view, it wasn't difficult.
Good. And from your point of view, Kush, kind of, because like it's not you then have to support the GP surgery to match up their account. Do they find that easy to do?
Yeah, so we've learned from, you know, past lessons in that, you know, GP partners and practice managers have got a million things on their mind. So setting up a digital apprenticeship service account isn't, you know, the top of their priority. But with now that my role's in place, because I've been able to support them to set their account up early, that's made a massive difference. That was the only thing that was needed. So as long as practices are setting up their accounts, once that bit is done, actually it's a very smooth process from there. It's about linking the accounts, accepting the connection request, and then working with your training provider to add your apprentice. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just to kind of point out that obviously myself and Nikki, that's part of what we do as well. So we would support any businesses with navigating their accounts. Going back to you, Martin, I think you kind of briefly described how you wanted your money to be spent, but did you have a say? Were you able to suggest where you wanted your money to go? Could you say no if it was a sector that you didn't necessarily want to support?
Yeah, I think during our discussions, I think it was really important to us that it was going to, you know, ethical businesses. It was going to businesses where we could actually monitor support ongoing, not just give the money. It was also about having that, you know, direct contact to making sure that your apprentice was happy, you know, being treated fairly, you know, in their apprenticeship. So it was critical, actually. I mean, as we spoke at the time, Leah, it was something that, although driven by Banbury, we had to make sure that we went through the global policies as well to make sure that we met all of those from an ethical perspective, and that wasn't an issue because, you know, we went through the providers, the people who required the levy transfer, and we made sure that obviously they did meet that criteria. But don't want to say that was overcomplicated. It was straightforward. I mean, we just went out. You helped us find some people who needed it. We had a brief chat about what they needed it for, and that allowed us to make a really quick decision as absolutely we wanted to move that forward with that business or that charity. And so now, you know, looking forward to looking for some more companies or charities this year to be able to look at what we can do, as I say, to make sure that we're absolutely maximising our unspent levy to support other areas of Oxfordshire and businesses within Oxfordshire. So no, it was straightforward.
That's great. That's really good to hear. Thanks, Martin. And Keith and Martin, what have you done to potentially celebrate the fact that you have shared your apprenticeship levy pledge? Have you publicised it at all?
Yes, we during the apprenticeship week we put some posts out just to show that, you know, we've supported several apprentices, outside of our business through the levy pledge.
Yeah, just follow up on Keith there from obviously as well, just trying to support this through LinkedIn, because I'm surprised just how few businesses take the opportunity to deliver something that is A, very simple, B, adds massive value to the local area, and for me it's just about trying to get the message out there. So LinkedIn and personal friends, contacts, I'm also trying to drive it through them to make them aware of how easy it is to do.
Thank you. And of course, we completely appreciate that. And we hope that by doing this webinar that we are showing potential levy paying businesses how easy it is to do and how we can support that process. And obviously Kush has some excellent examples of how that money could be utilised. Also, just delighted that JDE Banbury are going to be our main sponsor at our Apprenticeship Awards that are coming up this year as well. So there's lots of opportunities for business to engage with Oxlep in other ways as well. Mel, can we open up the floor maybe to any questions that are out there? And I think we might have one more slide that we can go to that has a link to our apprentice, or rather Kush's apprentice, that is placed with Hedina Health in Oxford. Could you go on to the next slide, please? Brilliant. So just while you're kind of thinking, have you got any questions that you would like to ask us? This is a picture of the apprentice that Martin and Keith and JDE Banbury are supporting by pledging their apprenticeship levy. So I believe Beth is doing the nursing associate apprenticeship. Is that a level 5, Kush?
It is, yeah.
It's a level 5, and I think it carries over 36 months.
24 months.
24 months.
Yes, and she'll then be able to go on to the full nursing degree if she chooses to do so. Brilliant,
brilliant. So we're really hopeful that in 2 years' time that Bethany will be able to do that. So yeah, I'll leave you just to kind of read the quote. Mel, are there any questions within the chat box for us?
Thanks, Leah. I think you probably answered one of them, because it was around do you sort of get to know the employer and the apprentice that you're transferring the levy to? So I think going back to your point, this links into what you were saying to Martin and Keith about celebrating that. What do you get as a pledging business? And obviously there's the feel good factor, there's the corporate social responsibility angle, but also that kind of opportunity to promote what you're doing, your own apprenticeship scheme, and make connections with fantastic organisations and apprentices such as Beth and those surgeries that are supporting. So that was one that somebody had asked about.
Yeah.
Will you get to know them?
I would say on the opposite side of that, there doesn't have to be much involvement. It can be just simply transferring your accounts across. I mean, I think the majority of businesses would probably want to know who they're supporting and kind of hear the story. But if there's such a big business that they really haven't got the time, it is just as simple as transferring money across and joining accounts.
Thank you, Leah. And I think, again, you've already touched on this one, I think, but how much say does a transferring employer have on who they can transfer to? So can it be as specific as a town, a county, a type of apprenticeship? How does that part work?
Yeah, so if we put your pledge up onto the national pledging page, you can be incredibly specific about where your money goes. So you can decide the town, the district, the area. You can also just choose the sector that you want to support if you would like to, and you can also choose the level. So I've had some businesses that have said would really want to kind of support those entry level apprenticeships, so those level 2s, level 3s, to increase opportunities for young people. But I think Martin, you kind of echoed and said that you have complete control. At the end of the day, it's your money, it's your levy pot.
Again, it's sorry, Keith. For us, it is part that we want to be, totally involved in the process, and then totally involved in seeing that come to fruition at the end, and taking great pride in seeing that levy actually in the person themselves and in what they're achieving. I mean, that's to be honest, that's probably more important to us than actually just letting that money go to to that individual. It's seeing the journey that and sharing that journey with them as well. So for me, it's critical. But I do understand that there are businesses maybe who just want to purely donate the money or transfer that levy to make sure that it's being used. But no, part of it for us is the excitement of seeing that journey of the individuals concerned and making those relationships.
Yeah, and that's how you can, at the end of the day, that's how you're showing your corporate social responsibility as well, isn't it? It's a fantastic way to promote and show that. Are there any other questions, Mel?
Yes, again, I think that Keith kindly explained about how it was easy to find out how much money was in the levy pot. If you're an employer who's thinking about best use of their levy and thinking, well, I'd like to employ some apprentices of my own, and you're not quite sure yet how much you're going to spend of your levy, is there a danger that you could almost over pledge, or how do you decide how much to pledge when you're looking to do a levy transfer?
Okay, so the decision ultimately comes down to you, the business. Myself and Nikki can work with you to think about kind of forward planning and the types of apprentices that you might be wanting to bring into the company, whether you're looking at upskilling or bringing in future talent. You basically can't overspend because the system won't allow you to. So there is a little safety net there that if the funds aren't there and you can't transfer on to someone else, there's no danger of kind of overspending and someone chasing you for that money. But it takes a little bit of kind of forward thinking and planning, but myself and Nikki are more than happy to support any business with that. Is there anything you'd like to add, Nikki, that maybe I've missed?
No, I don't think so. And I think just to reiterate what you said previously is that that money, pledged or not, is still yours, and you're in total control of where it goes. But absolutely, with a little bit of kind of workforce development planning and looking at the apprentices that you might take on, you can be safe in the knowledge that you're not going to you can't pledge more than you've got.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure that's reassuring for people to hear. And one question about use of the levy: can a business choose to use the levy to support with a costs of hiring an apprentice, or does it have to go towards the training and assessment for an apprentice?
Okay, so at the moment, it can only be used to fund the training costs of the apprentice. However, within Oxfordshire, we do have a apprenticeship grant that is open to apprentices so long as they live within Oxford and have an Oxfordshire postcode. So if particularly maybe for a smaller business, if you were looking for other funds to help support with some of those costs, then the grant may be an avenue that you could look at. And again, we would fully support you in understanding how that grant could be used and then making those applications.
Thanks, Leah. That's useful to know as well. I think all the extra funds could be very helpful. And is that for people starting an apprenticeship, or can that be somebody who is already doing an apprenticeship?
Yeah, both. So for starters and maybe for completers as well, it might be that you've got an apprentice that for whatever reason is having a little bit of a wobble, is facing some barriers. Maybe that grant could help to kind of get them over that last hurdle. And more importantly, it's for any age apprentice as well. Apprenticeships are for any age.
Brilliant, thank you, Leah. Just one more question. I think we've almost run out of time, but in terms of timescale, so we're obviously coming to the end of the financial year now. Is this a good time for businesses to be thinking about pledging levy? Does they have a new allowance for the new financial year?
Yeah, Nikki, would you like to take that one?
Yes, so as we know, the levy is calculated based on the kind of previous year's PAYE submission. So come April, the levy pot is recalculated, as it were. If you're a large employer and you haven't had either a huge increase or decrease in staff, the levy pot should pretty much stay the same. You can pledge now, would be great. You would then just need to pledge again at the start of the new tax year, because all the pledges that are live at the moment get taken down. We believe it's the first time it's happening by the National Apprenticeship Service. So yes, it would just need to be repledged again at the start of the new tax year. But yeah, it's a great time to think about it. Any pledges that are made after the new start of the tax year, it's for the amount that is available for that year to be pledged. So we can support with all of that, but a great time to start thinking about it.
Perfect, thank you. And that's a good way to kind of come, I think, to the end of the questions, which is brilliant. Thank you all. How does a business, if they decide they would like to do this, what's the next steps? How do they contact you? What do they do next?
Thank you, Mel. So, Sarah, could we have the next slide up, please? So, yes, first of all, before we go into next steps, I just want to really thank Keith, Martin and Kush for their time today, and Leah too. Been some great discussions, and I think really demonstrate the kind of the value that pledging levy can create to kind of our local community. So thank you all so much for your time. It's been wonderful to have you here today. In terms of next steps, there are other areas that Leah and I can support you with. Some of these are listed here. In terms of contacting us, our email addresses are at the bottom, but we're more than happy to have a conversation with you at any point, even if it's an initial kind of exploratory conversation. An important thing to note is just that our advice and support is already pre-funded. So there is no cost to yourselves for us providing that advice and support. Is already pre-funded. Next slide, please. So again, just want to thank you all for joining us today. You'll see here a couple of QR codes which will take you through to further information, but obviously do get in touch with myself and Leah directly. And also, just to make you aware, we have another webinar coming up on the 29th of March, which will be all about growing a skilled workforce for tomorrow through apprenticeship. So that will touch more on how best to use your levy to develop your workforce, either existing employees or new recruits. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.